Respect is not demanded, it is not begged for, and it is never given to weakness disguised as kindness. Women respect a certain kind of man not because of loud words, flashy status, or empty promises, but because of something far deeper. This kind of presence is rare, controlled, and unmistakable. Today, we break down why women only respect this kind of man and what truly sets this energy apart. Emotional control is one of the rarest and most powerful traits a man can possess. It is not about suppressing feelings or pretending emotions do not exist. It is about mastery, choosing when to respond instead of reacting automatically. When emotions run high, most people lose clarity. Voices rise, words spill without thought, and actions are driven by impulse rather than intention. But emotional control creates a different presence entirely. It shows strength without aggression and confidence without noise. Women instinctively respect this quality because it creates safety and stability. Chaos repels. Consistency attracts. When challenges appear, disagreements, stress, uncertainty, emotional steadiness becomes a silent signal of leadership. There is no panic, no emotional volatility, no desperate need to win every moment. Instead, there is patience, there is awareness, there is the ability to pause, assess, and choose the best response. That restraint communicates maturity far more loudly than any emotional display ever could. Reacting emotionally gives away power. It places control in the hands of circumstances or other people. Emotional control takes that power back. Silence becomes intentional rather than awkward. Words become precise rather than rushed. Decisions are guided by logic and values instead of temporary feelings. This level of composure is rare, and rarity commands respect naturally. There is also a quiet confidence embedded in emotional control. It shows that self-worth is not fragile. Insults do not need to be fought. Disrespect does not trigger insecurity. Provocation does not dictate behavior. When emotions are regulated, there is no need to prove anything. That grounded energy is deeply respected because it reflects inner strength rather than external validation. Emotional control also demonstrates accountability. Instead of blaming emotions on others or situations, responsibility is taken for reactions and choices. That accountability builds trust. Trust grows when actions remain consistent regardless of emotional storms. This consistency makes interactions feel predictable in the best way, calm, steady, and secure. Importantly, emotional control does not mean emotional absence. Empathy still exists. Understanding still exists. But emotions are processed internally before being expressed intentionally. This creates communication that is clear rather than chaotic. Conflicts become conversations, not battles. Disagreements become opportunities for understanding, not power struggles. Over time, this composure shapes how others behave as well. People mirror energy. When emotional reactions are removed, manipulation loses its effect. Drama fades when it finds no fuel. Respect grows because boundaries are enforced without hostility and strength is shown without force. Ultimately, emotional control is discipline in its purest form. It is the ability to remain centered while the world tries to pull balance away. It signals confidence, maturity, and self-mastery, all qualities that naturally earn respect, not because they are demanded, but because they are unmistakable. Clear boundaries are a silent language of self-respect. They communicate value without the need for constant explanation or justification. When boundaries are weak or inconsistent, confusion follows. Expectations blur, behavior becomes unpredictable, and respect slowly erodes. But when boundaries are clear and calmly enforced, they create structure. Structure creates safety, and safety creates respect. Setting boundaries is not about control or rigidity. It is about knowing what is acceptable and what is not, and standing by that standard without emotion. There is no arguing, no over-explaining, and no need to convince anyone of their validity. Boundaries that require endless explanation are already being negotiated. True boundaries exist regardless of approval. Women respect this because it signals certainty. Certainty is attractive because it reflects inner stability. There is no shifting behavior to gain approval, and no bending of values to avoid discomfort. When limits are calmly enforced, it shows strength without aggression. It shows that time, energy, and emotional space are valued and protected. The power of boundaries lies in consistency. Saying no once means nothing if it is followed by yes out of guilt or fear of conflict. Respect grows when actions align with stated limits every time. This consistency builds credibility. People learn what behavior is acceptable and adjust accordingly. When they do not, consequences are applied without anger or drama, simply as a natural response. Boundaries also remove the need for emotional negotiation. There is no chasing, no pleading, and no attempting to be understood at all costs. Silence becomes an answer. Distance becomes a message. Walking away becomes a form of communication. This restraint is often misunderstood as coldness, but in reality it is clarity. Clarity is respected because it removes confusion and emotional chaos. Another reason boundaries command respect is that they reflect self-worth. Someone who values personal standards does not tolerate repeated disrespect, mixed signals, or emotional games. Disrespect is addressed once. If it continues, access is reduced. This shows that respect is not optional and presence is earned, not guaranteed. Healthy boundaries also create balance. They allow connection without dependence and closeness without loss of identity. Independence remains intact while interaction stays intentional. This balance prevents resentment and emotional exhaustion, creating space for mutual respect to grow naturally. Ultimately, clear boundaries are not about pushing people away. They are about defining how close others are allowed to come. When those limits are firm, calm, and consistent, they send a powerful message of value is known, standards are upheld, and respect is the only acceptable language. Purpose gives direction to life, and direction creates gravity. When purpose comes first, attention naturally follows instead of being chased. A life built around meaning, growth, and long-term vision carries a different energy, focused, intentional, and grounded. This focus is deeply respected because it shows that time and energy are invested wisely, not scattered in search of validation. When attention becomes the goal, behavior shifts. Decisions are influenced by how they will be perceived rather than by what truly matters. Purpose-driven living does the opposite. Choices are made based on alignment with goals, values, and direction. This creates consistency. Consistency builds trust. Trust builds respect. Women instinctively recognize when focus is genuine rather than performative. Purpose also eliminates desperation. There is no urgency to impress or constantly prove worth. Validation becomes unnecessary because fulfillment is already present. This inner fulfillment changes how interactions feel, calmer, more confident, and less emotionally charged. People are drawn to those who are already moving somewhere, not those waiting to be chosen. A purpose-centered life creates natural leadership. Leadership does not require authority or dominance. It emerges from direction. When daily actions reflect a larger mission, whether personal growth, craft mastery, or long-term goals, there is a quiet authority in that discipline. It shows commitment. It shows patience. It shows the ability to delay gratification. These traits earn respect because they are rare and difficult to fake. Purpose also creates emotional balance. When challenges arise in relationships or social dynamics, they do not derail focus. Emotions are felt, but they do not dictate direction. This stability signals maturity. It shows that identity is not tied to external approval. Life continues moving forward regardless of who stays or leaves. That independence commands respect. Another powerful aspect of purpose is selectiveness. Time becomes valuable. Energy becomes protected. Not every invitation is accepted, and not every distraction is entertained. This selectiveness is not arrogance, it is prioritization. Women respect this because it demonstrates discernment and self-awareness. Being chosen by someone with direction feels meaningful because access is not freely given. Purpose also creates growth momentum. Progress, even when slow, is attractive. Effort towards something meaningful creates confidence rooted in action rather than words. That confidence is steady, not reactive. It does not rise and fall based on attention received. It remains grounded in progress made. Ultimately, purpose before attention reshapes everything. Interactions become intentional instead of needy. Presence becomes magnetic rather than performative. Respect follows naturally because purpose signals strength, direction, and self-mastery. When life has meaning beyond validation, attention becomes a side effect and respect becomes inevitable. True confidence is quiet. It does not announce itself or seek recognition. It exists without comparison and without the need to dominate a room. Confidence without arrogance is rooted in self-knowledge, the understanding of strengths, limitations, and value without exaggeration or insecurity. This balance is deeply respected because it feels authentic rather than performative. Arrogance is loud because it is fragile. It needs constant reinforcement through attention, praise, or superiority. Confidence, on the other hand, is steady. It does not rise when complimented or collapse when challenged. This steadiness creates a calm presence that others naturally trust. Women respect this because it signals emotional maturity and inner security. One of the clearest signs of healthy confidence is comfort in silence. There is no pressure to fill every moment with words or opinions. Listening becomes natural. Responses are thoughtful rather than reactive. This ability to remain present without performing shows that worth is not tied to being noticed. That restraint speaks louder than any attempt to impress. Confidence without arrogance also shows through humility. Acknowledging mistakes does not threaten self-worth. Growth is valued over ego. There is no need to be right at all costs or to win every disagreement. This openness creates emotional safety. Respect grows where safety exists because people feel seen rather than challenged. Another key aspect is respect for others. Confidence does not diminish those around it. There is no need to interrupt, belittle, or compete unnecessarily. Space is allowed for others to express themselves without feeling overshadowed. This balance demonstrates strength that does not rely on comparison. Women respect this because it reflects leadership through presence rather than control. This type of confidence is also consistent. It does not change depending on who is watching. Behavior remains the same in private and in public. There is no performance mask. This authenticity builds trust over time. Trust deepens respect because it removes uncertainty and emotional instability. Confidence without arrogance also accepts rejection and criticism without defensiveness. Not every connection will align, and that reality is understood. Walking away from situations that do not serve growth happens without bitterness or resentment. This emotional independence is powerful because it shows that identity is not dependent on approval. Ultimately, confidence without arrogance is self-assured calm. It is knowing value without shouting it. It is standing firm without stepping on others. It is presence without pressure. Women respect this energy because it feels real, stable, and secure, qualities that cannot be faked and never need to be proven. Self-respect is the foundation of how all other respect is formed. It is not something that appears only when things are going well. It shows most clearly when limits are tested. When self-respect is non-negotiable, behavior remains consistent regardless of emotion, attraction, or pressure. This consistency sends a powerful message about value without the need for confrontation or explanation. Self-respect begins internally. It is the decision to treat time, energy, and dignity as valuable resources. When these are valued internally, they are protected externally. Disrespect is not ignored, laughed off, or justified away. It is recognized and addressed calmly. If it continues, distance replaces discussion. This response is not driven by anger but by clarity. Women respect this because it signals emotional strength. There is no desperation to be accepted at any cost. Approval is not chased. Validation is not required to feel whole. This independence changes the entire dynamic of interaction. Instead of trying to earn respect, respect becomes the minimum requirement for access. Another critical aspect of self-respect is the willingness to walk away. Walking away is often misunderstood as weakness, but in reality it is one of the strongest actions possible. It shows that self-worth is not negotiable. Staying in situations that consistently diminish dignity sends the opposite message. Leaving reinforces standards without a single raised voice. Self-respect also removes the need for emotional bargaining. There is no over-explaining feelings, no pleading for understanding, and no accepting mixed signals. Communication is clear but not excessive. Silence becomes powerful when words have already been spoken. This restraint is respected because it shows control rather than emotional dependence. Consistency is what makes self-respect believable. Values are not flexible based on convenience or attraction. What is unacceptable once remains unacceptable always. This predictability builds trust. People know where the line is and they understand the consequences of crossing it. Respect grows when boundaries are real, not situational. Self-respect also shapes behavior in subtle ways. Body language becomes calm, tone becomes measured, decisions are made without guilt or fear of loss. This composure signals confidence rooted in self-worth rather than ego. Women instinctively recognize this stability and respond with respect because it feels secure and grounded. Ultimately, self-respect being non-negotiable means choosing dignity over comfort and long-term value over short-term validation. It means standing by standards even when it is difficult or lonely. That strength is unmistakable. Respect follows not because it is demanded, but because it is already embodied. Independence is the ability to stand emotionally whole without relying on anyone else to complete or stabilize that state. Emotional independence does not mean isolation or detachment. It means strength. It is the understanding that happiness, confidence, and fulfillment are internally generated rather than borrowed from approval, reassurance, or constant attention. This inner stability is deeply respected because it creates balance instead of pressure. When emotional dependence exists, relationships become heavy, expectations increase, reassurance is constantly needed. And small changes in behavior can trigger insecurity. Independence removes that weight. Interactions feel lighter, freer, and more genuine. Women respect this because it allows connection without obligation and closeness without emotional burden. Emotionally independent energy communicates self-trust. Decisions are made from clarity rather than fear of abandonment or rejection. There is no need to cling, chase, or seek constant validation. Space is allowed naturally, and absence does not create panic. This calm response to uncertainty signals maturity and confidence. Independence also strengthens attraction through choice rather than need. Presence is offered freely, not out of fear of loss. Time spent together feels intentional instead of required. This dynamic creates mutual respect because connection is based on desire, not dependency. Being wanted is always more powerful than being needed. Another powerful aspect of emotional independence is resilience. Setbacks, disagreements, or emotional shifts do not collapse identity or self-worth. Emotions are felt, processed, and released without becoming overwhelming. This resilience creates stability. Stability builds trust. Trust deepens respect. Women naturally gravitate toward emotional steadiness because it feels safe and grounded. Independence also encourages personal growth. Energy is invested in purpose, discipline, and self-improvement rather than emotional monitoring. This forward momentum is attractive because it reflects a life that is moving, evolving, and expanding. Respect grows when effort is directed inward rather than outward for approval. This independence also prevents emotional manipulation. When validation is not needed, manipulation loses power. Guilt, withdrawal, or emotional pressure no longer control behavior. Boundaries remain intact and responses stay calm. This clarity commands respect because it reflects inner authority rather than emotional vulnerability. Ultimately, independence over emotional dependence is about wholeness. It is knowing that connection adds to life but does not define it. When happiness is self-created and confidence is self-sustained, relationships become healthier and more balanced. Women respect this because it represents strength without neediness, presence without pressure, and connection built on choice rather than reliance.